welcome to another episode of When Push Comes to Shove. Today I am talking to Ellie. She's an obstetrician and she had a home birth herself with twins. Is that right, Ellie?
That's right, yeah.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much. So, first of all, I would love to know why an obstetrician has decided to have a home birth, especially with twins, when that is not really standard practice, is it? So can you please tell us your story? The floor is yours.
Sure, yeah, so it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Um, my story, I guess, starts with my first pregnancy, which was now nearly 8 years ago. Um, and that was a twin pregnancy. Um, and I had a very smooth pregnancy journey, I would say. um, and got to what I was told is full term for twins. And at about um, 37 and a half weeks pregnant, I had a cesarean with them because they were both lying transverse, so
Oh,
two,
right. Okay.
no heads down. Um, and it wasn't at all a bad experience. It was a really fine experience, and I felt safe. And I felt my babies were safe, but it didn't feel like a particularly, the actual birth didn't feel like a particularly joyous experience. It's not a day that I look back on um, with huge, um, how would I say it? It's a different feeling to the feeling I have looking back on my subsequent births, which were really different. But it wasn't a bad birth, and I did feel my wishes were respected, and it was a very gentle cesarean.
Allow you skin to skin?
Yeah, they did actually. I had a really fantastic consultant in Oxford who knew me and gave me the baby straight away, literally out of the tummy over the drape onto me.
Wow, lovely.
Um, yeah, and so that was sort of the start of my journey. At that point, I was a junior doctor, but knew I wanted to train to be an obstetrician. Um, but I hadn't got to that stage in my training as I started medicine quite late as a graduate. Um, so then my second pregnancy was a single baby, and I've always been, I've always been interested in birth, and I've seen quite a lot of births as a medical student and a doctor, and um, everything was very smooth, very normal. Healthy mum, healthy baby, and this kind of risk factor kept being kind of pushed onto me. VBAC, VBAC. You've got a scar on your uterus, is extra risk. And the more I read and learned and talked to people, the more I realized that actually my chances of having a really straightforward birth were really high. I was a, healthy, reasonably young woman with a healthy baby on board, and um, why not? And I started going to a home birth group.
You started.
Yeah, so I was living in Oxford at the time, which is where I'd had my first twins, and there's a lovely a home birth group just run by women in the community, and we went a couple of times, my partner and I, and realised that there are people who have vaginal birth after cesareans at home, and that actually maybe that would be the best option for us. And I also have a background in statistics and epidemiology, which is what I did before I did medicine. So I kind of read every paper under the sun and all the systematic reviews, and realized that the risk, when you think about me as an individual, was actually really small, and that I lived 10 minutes from a hospital. And if there was any problems, or there were any concerns with me or the baby, that I could go to hospital, and I wasn't averse to that at all. I think also it was driven slightly by my postnatal experience in hospital the first time, which just felt, I just felt like I just desperate to get home basically the whole time. It just didn't feel the right place to be. I didn't feel I could really get to know my babies and really work out breastfeeding with different people coming in 20 times a day to check things and take photos and, you know, whatever.
Well, that experience isn't really conducive to a clinical environment, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I was really keen to avoid that. I was really keen to avoid being in hospital if it wasn't necessary. Um, um, so yeah, so we made the choice to plan a home birth, and actually, um, the consultant who I saw um, in Oxford was fantastic and said, you know, you're informed, you know, we've told you everything we know, you know everything there is to know, and if that's your choice, that's fine. So I actually really did feel that that was respected. I had quite a tricky time um, right near Ash's birth because I went over 42 weeks, um, and decided to wait out a few days, and then ended up my waters breaking going into labour. But I had some phone calls from, I had a phone call from a sort of consultant midwife, kind of, um, with some very, I would say, heavy attempts at persuasion, possibly using not always particularly helpful or sensitive language to try and encourage me to come into hospital. Um, um, because of the fact that I was slightly post-dates and my waters had broken and I had a cesarean scar, all of which I knew the risks of, but I felt sort of comfortable that for me it was the right decision to try and be at home and transfer if needed. And we had a really wonderful birth at home of Asha. That was in 2015. Um, and yeah, I look back at that day, and it was a completely magical experience for me. I felt um, really powerful, really safe, felt um, really well looked after in a space that was mine and was home. And sort of the next few days were just spent kind of gazing at this little person that I couldn't believe had come out of me like that. So it was a very different experience. So then, third pregnancy,
When did
not
you
planned.
qualify in obstetrics?
Was that?
When did you qualify in obstetrics?
So I started my specialty training in obstetrics in 2016.
Right, okay.
Um, so yeah, it's like I'm still fairly junior because I've been working sort of on because I've had another pregnancy since then, and I've been working less than full time. So I'm still fairly junior in obstetrics. I started. Um, so that was Asha in 2015, and then 2017 found out we were pregnant and went along to our 12-week scan to find out there were two in there. And I sort of until then I thought, oh, it's going to be simple this time. You know, I've done the negotiation, I've done the successful, you know, birth at home after cesarean, no complications, all fine. It's not going to be such a, it's going to be easy this time. I'm going to, you know, I know what I want. It was amazing. Hopefully we'll be able to have that again. And then we found out we were having twins, and I sort of got this sinking feeling, not because of twins, because we were really excited to be having twins, and you know, also slightly thrown by the fact we were going to have 5 children in in
Yeah.
less than 5 years, but just the worry about having to negotiate um, for what we wanted, and also not knowing what we wanted, because you know it was a process that we went through during that pregnancy to work out what we did want and what we felt comfortable with. Um, so you know, I had my scans every 4 weeks. The babies were growing fine. I was well. There were nothing came up during that pregnancy, and I think I'd been sort of holding out because, you know, working in obstetrics, you know, I do like to err on the side of thinking things are more likely to go right than wrong, but also, you know, who knows what could happen during a twin pregnancy. So we sort of held out making decisions, and I think probably 34 or 5 weeks, um, realised we really needed to think strongly. And I'd actually had a midwife at work who worked part as an independent midwife and partly as an NHS midwife.
Yeah.
And she just said to me in passing, "Oh, I've got a twin mum that is planning a home birth, and um, yeah, I'm on call for her." And I'd been like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." And then you know, she reported back that this woman had had a successful twin birth at home, and then actually through her, I got in touch with Andy Parker, and actually it ended up being Andy and this midwife from my work was the second midwife who came for our birth in the end. So that kind of just told me that it could happen and it could be fine. And yeah, I did a really intense period of what I do, which is like reading everything, um, and writing notes on stats, and went to an appointment, I don't know how many weeks, maybe 35 weeks or 36 weeks maybe, with the obstetrician, and said, you know, we've decided we're going to try a home birth with twins, and you know, didn't get a particularly warm or positive response.
I can't imagine you would, no.
And
What were their reasons?
well, so the reasons were mainly to do with the second twin, because there's a reasonable unpredictability about what happens with a second twin after the first twin's born. Um, you know, they could feet come out or cord come out, or you know, you don't know what position. Suddenly there's all this space in the uterus when the first twin's out, and the second twin can roll about or whatever, you know, it's fairly unpredictable. But at the same time, I had a good look, and it seemed to be, again, given me with two well-grown babies who are likely to be full term, with the first one had been head down all the way through, that actually the chances of something bad happening were fairly small.
Mm-hmm.
The chances of a good outcome were pretty high, and there are very few things that would be so serious that we couldn't get to hospital in time, basically. And we kind of did a lot of chatting and soul searching and reading, and decided that for us the best option was to have a home birth, and that kind of we were, you know, if something did happen, that, you know, that was our decision, and we'd made that decision, and we'd have to live with it, and we were okay with that. Yeah, and the first conversation I had with Andy, who's the independent midwife, on the phone I first spoke to her, and she said, "Yeah, I'd fully support you. Don't see any reason why we wouldn't support you in a twin home birth." I mean, my heart basically soared. It just, for the first time in these weeks of kind of wondering what to do, and reading and thinking, and not quite knowing, and having appointments where it just felt, you know, no one was ever mean or bad, but just didn't feel I was on the same page as other people I'd seen. Yeah, my heart just soared, and it just felt like, wow, someone is willing to support me in what I actually want and what I think is best for me and my body and my family.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we went for it, and actually the twins were born at 40 weeks plus 2 days. So for twins, that's supposedly over 2 weeks overdue, because 38 weeks is sort of the limit of, in the NHS, the limit of sort of how far you're
Well, they
recommended.
allow you.
Yeah, well, I say recommended because I never tell women that they're allowed or not allowed to do
Well, I'm
anything.
glad you don't do that.
Yeah,
Because I'll tell you what, this is why I'm doing this, because the common story is I wasn't allowed.
I know.
And this is why I'm honoured to interview you, and why
Oh,
I think you're a breath of fresh air.
oh, thank you.
And I'm just delighted. I mean, this is wicked. This is what we need, Ellie. This is amazing. And
Yeah,
women will have what you just said about when you spoke to Andy and you felt that. I mean, your words now, they could make other women go, oh, wow, there's a chance,
yeah,
of getting what I want.
yeah. It's a really amazing feeling when you feel listened to, and like I do feel that um having had that experience is really, really helpful at my work. I never tell anyone they're allowed or not allowed. I say we are, we would advise this, we recommend this, but ultimately it's your body and it's your choice.
Amazing.
And I'm like hopeful, or like, I want to do this for years and years, and hoping that having someone who feels like that, I can make my small contribution.
Oh,
Mm.
it's just a breath of fresh air. It really is.
Yeah. So we had this wonderful I mean, yeah, we had again a bit of a fight at the end, as you can imagine, because um,
Yeah.
I waited to go into labour naturally, and um, me being sort of me and a doctor and working in the NHS and being very conscientious, kind of went along to all my appointments, and the obstetrician wanted to see me every week in the last 4 weeks because I was kind of full term, and so I sort of dutifully went to these appointments and sat there very politely saying, "Oh, thank you so much for all the information. Yes, I'm very aware that you want to induce me now, and I'm really happy to go home and wait another week." And then I'd come back the following week and they'd say the same. And I'd say, "Oh, thank you very much for the
You've got to come
information.
and play along though, haven't you?
I really appreciate what you've told me, and I'm going to go home again and wait to go into labour."
Yeah.
I mean, which is kind of true, and I actually think it's not a right or a wrong decision. It's like it's a personal decision, and I don't think home birth is.
100% right. But
I don't think home birth.
unfortunately, women are
Oh,
seeing that their care providers as dictating to them when it really should be a matter of these are what our guidelines say. By the way, not really based on any evidence, they're just guidelines.
yeah,
Here is some information that we can point you to make an informed decision. But
totally agree.
that is not happening. And there's one thing I must ask you, and I'm trying to understand why this doesn't come up. So when doctors are talking about the implications of a cesarean section, why does the human microbiome not come up? I have never heard anyone said, oh, well, a cesarean section can have an implication on the microbiome and the seeding of the gut of the baby. If there's no skin to skin, the breastfeeding. Why does this is a huge thing. I don't know if you've seen microbirth, but if it can affect a baby's immune system in a way where so many children are now suffering with allergies and respiratory problems after a cesarean section. The evidence is there, very clearly there. Why is this not being brought up more when women are making an informed decision about a cesarean section?
Yeah, I guess I don't. I mean, I have read some of the evidence, but quite a long time ago, about the effect on, yeah, allergies and
Yeah,
asthma and possibly
yeah,
obesity.
obesity, yeah,
Um, but it's not something I've looked into in detail, actually, so I don't really know. It's obviously something that hasn't got into the mainstream
yeah.
um
I'm shocked though because
voice,
the
because
evidence
it's not.
is
It's
there.
absolutely, as you say, it's not talked about.
It's not. And another thing that shocks me with that, I remember being at a birth once where it was an emergency cesarean section, and I had a chat with a consultant. And I said, look, she wants the microbiome and the seeding. Can we just roll up a bit of gauze, put it in her vagina, and then just pat the baby down with it afterwards? No, we don't do that here. I mean, what do you mean you don't do that? It takes 2 seconds. And then she has suffered trauma since then, that she was denied that. I mean, now I just tell women, just do it yourself.
Yeah.
But that's awful. Her child has respiratory problems and everything else that goes along with it, and she's traumatized. That just one person.
Well, I think like you're making a really, really good point, because you know, so much of it is about control and um, feeling that you have made your own decisions and had your choices respected. And actually, I think generally, if women feel that they've made their own decisions, then the the sort of fear that doctors and midwives have about litigation and sort of about, you know, complaints, actually all the evidence shows that the more women feel that they've genuinely been listened to and have made their own decisions, the less likely they are to make any kind of complaint. So actually practicing defensive medicine doesn't have the outcome that doctors think it might have. It doesn't stop, you know, intervening a lot doesn't necessarily stop those complaints, litigation, because actually it's the sense of control and empowerment that women feel really, really strongly about, and that you know, that's the feeling that they will be left with after a birth.
How do you think this has happened? And I mean, how have we got to such a time where birth has become a medical procedure rather than a physiological procedure? And where you're okay, so you've got your routine pregnancies in, you know, you go over 40 weeks and it's time to start thinking about induction, and you know, you can't do this because of your BMI, or you know, your baby is breech, you have to have surgery for your child to be born. Like, what, how has it got to this? Like, you just said a word earlier, litigation. Do you think it's that? Do you think that's the main catalyst in this? And I can't understand how birth has become a medical procedure and trauma has become normal. It's heartbreaking, and this is why a change has to come, and it has to come from women, not within the world of maternity care. If women don't accept this, and by the way, you are not including this at all. I mean, you're not telling people you're not allowed, and you know, you're giving people power, informed consent. But why is this not normal? Why is this not the narrative normally? I mean, what's going on? What do you think's happening?
Well, I mean, in some ways it's better than it used to be. You know, there's a sort of long history of paternalistic medicine, and you know, and actually in it's not good enough, but I don't think we're going in the wrong direction. And we're doing a lot better than a lot of other countries, where, you know, I work with a lot of doctors from other countries, and they say basically they just tell women what to do. They don't even really document it, and women just do it. Just sometimes they don't even. It's not really informed. They just do a cesarean. It's sort of, you know. I'm not saying that makes it okay, but I think a lot of it is cultural and historical, and safety is put above everything else. And the arguments are really difficult, because if you induced everyone at 38 weeks, it would reduce the stillbirth number. It just, you know, which is some people would argue it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it, because there's so many more things to think about. But
why would it reduce the stillbirth rate?
Well, because lots of stillbirths happen later on, so lots of stillbirths.
Yeah, but are there stillbirths in inductions?
I actually don't, as far as I know, I don't think there's evidence that inductions cause stillbirths. So I don't think.
But there is evidence that inductions cause trauma for the baby, you know.
And
making the baby's heart rate, or
yeah. and certainly trauma for mums,
Yeah,
definitely. I agree. I'm not arguing that we should do that at all.
I know, I
But
know, I know. I'm
but
playing devil's advocate here. That's the idea.
you know, yeah. I'm not arguing for it, but I think the sort of idea of safe mum, safe baby, you've done well is like um is is what it is at the moment, which is really sad because actually um what we should be doing is letting women decide what's right for them, and you know, whether that's a planned cesarean, you know, at 38 weeks because they're desperately anxious that their baby's going to die and they don't want to go anywhere near vaginal
I
birth.
wonder, I mean, yes, maybe it would reduce the stillbirth rate, but you have to ask the question, is nature doing something wrong? So who's to say those babies who have been born at 38 weeks won't die in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, um,
There's not, that's the thing with
there
epidemiology.
will be more there will be more respiratory problems at birth in babies if all babies were born a bit early, definitely.
Yeah, but
That's
I'm saying, like, I'm talking about from a nature perspective. So
yeah.
has nature got it that wrong, that if we get to 40 weeks it gets quite risky? Or is it that maybe there is something wrong with that baby, and I don't know, there's something going on that we can't see? And who's to say that if that baby was induced at 38 weeks, who at 2 weeks old, maybe there starts to show a problem?
Yeah,
But you never know.
you
And
never know.
but I think there's Marsden Wagner that said, if we know one thing about obstetrics, it's we don't know enough. And if you have a fleeting glance in history, we've been interfering too much. We've been, you know, everything. There was the uh, all these different drugs that they started using, and they stopped because it was causing problems. They were giving women X-rays, they stopped that, and there was thalidomide, they stopped that. You know, I But our bodies work perfectly well. Sometimes they don't. That is when we need medicine. And it's so important. And we should all be very grateful for that. But to assume that healthy women will need intervention for the most part
I
is
can
wrong.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's exactly why I felt. And also, you know, you mentioned guidelines before. Guidelines are guidelines, and often, particularly obstetric guidelines, do not have very good evidence behind them.
No, roughly
And
10 to 20% evidence-based guidelines in obstetrics.
a lot of the nice guidelines, well, a lot of the guidelines also say this is based on poor evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and then there are other guidelines that have better evidence and also are not listened to. You know, like there's a new, or not new, reasonably new breech RCOG guideline that says, you know, breech birth is only very marginally more risky for a baby and no more risky for mum.
Is that down to the level of competency of the midwife, though?
Probably some of it, yes. That's so, yeah, yeah. Um, and
I asked the consultant
yeah,
midwife
we
at
don't
my
do any
trust.
breech. We basically, I mean, we do very, very few vaginal breech births, and that's
Yeah,
not evidence based. That's historical.
yeah, that's what worries me. I spoke to the consultant midwife at my trust when I was pregnant, and I said, "Can I ask you what evidence your your advice is based on?" I went, "Don't tell me the Hannah study." And he said, "Yeah, that." I went, "But that was withdrawn." What?
And the updated guidelines are now not based on that study,
Yeah.
and they say that, you know, vaginal breech birth should absolutely be an option, and it just doesn't happen. Um, and actually, it's really, really difficult to recommend a woman to choose a vaginal breech birth in a system where everyone else in the system doesn't feel vaginal breech birth is safe. And I say feel because it's not an evidence based um, thing. And so actually, if I see a woman with a breech baby, it's really difficult to say vaginal birth is a genuine option because I am worried that that woman will come in labor and will be told we're going to do a cesarean even though you'd planned, because we don't feel comfortable, you
Yeah,
know. So
yeah.
it's really difficult. You know, we have to, as you know, you've worked in the system, you know, everyone's working in this system that is hugely imperfect and influenced by all sorts of things, history, culture, everything. Um, so yeah, it's difficult.
It's so hard. I mean, it's because of the stigma attached to it. I mean, I had someone coming at me on Facebook on my own page saying, and I wasn't advising, I don't advise, I support, and I just provide information. I simply said, breech is a variation of normal and should be an option for women should they choose to do so. You can't say that, it's so dangerous. I went, I said, I basically said, what do you know? Please tell me this information that I don't have. And it was just someone who's heard all these horror stories, but from nothing. You know, when you kind of repeat back what you've heard, but you have no idea why you're saying it.
Yeah,
It's that. And then, so if this person met a friend who said, I'm having a vaginal birth with a breech baby, my doctor said it's okay, they'd be like, no, it's not. It's very dangerous. And then it's the people that talk amongst themselves. This is why we have to make this mainstream. That's why I've written this song. And this is where we can get the conversation going, because the change can't come from in the maternity system. It doesn't work like that. Women have to go, actually, I want to question this now. And no one is here to say birth like this, birth like that. That's not the idea. The idea is to say, take back your power. You are allowed informed decisions and you can do your research, whether that is going around talking to your doctor and your midwife, doing your own research, bringing it all together and going, okay, I know what I want to do now. That's the idea. And I really hope it starts to happen, because I'm not seeing enough of it in the mainstream at the moment. I mean, I say I'm not seeing enough. I'm not seeing it like much at all. And
yeah,
it's so sad.
yeah.
After what you've just said, I can see, your issue on this as a professional, as an obstetrician. It's, oh God, it's very complicated, isn't it?
Very complicated. Yeah, and actually, what we need is leaders. Um, you know, well, there's different ways to change things, aren't there? But um, I would hope that, you know, bit by bit, you know, new leaders in obstetrics will come through and start to do things differently and lead in a slightly different way.
Hopefully, unless
Um,
they're being, there's literal peer pressure. I can see that as well. If you're
yeah,
renegade, or it's just, there's
true as
pressure
well.
from all angles. It's awful.
Yeah,
But
and I mean, go
all I
on.
know is I hear woman after woman after woman saying, I wasn't allowed. And it breaks my heart.
And actually, birth has the power to be just incredibly powerful and
Life changing.
life changing. That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, thinking back on the day that my twins were born at home, it just feels like the best thing in the world. I felt like I was warm and safe and looked after, and this like lovely environment with three gorgeous midwives and my partner, and in my own home and in labor, and just it just in my head is just the most perfect thing. And I think
It's
like,
beautiful. I wish more people could experience it.
I know, me too. And
Not enough
I just had a
midwives.
friend who had a really awful, really difficult first birth ending in an emergency cesarean, and then a really wonderful second birth.
It
Um,
feels the first one. I
very
do believe.
straightforward, and yeah, she sort of couldn't believe how amazing it was.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, compared to the first one, and it's just, yeah, it's so important.
Mm.
And it's something every woman could, I don't mean every woman will do it, but I mean, you know, things can go wrong, but it is something that everyone has the capacity to do
Yeah.
if things go right. And it's just,
You have a normal pregnancy, and I mean, even if you go against guidelines, it doesn't mean to say you're. I hate the word risk. It's a guideline word, but it's subjective.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Everyone has the capacity to do it. But I want to just quickly go back to you mentioned you had a beautiful birth with independent midwives. There seems to be quite a negative stigma about independent midwives. Oh, you're paying, you're charging people for a birth. They think it's disgusting. There's a lot of that. What would you say to that? To people who think it's not right to charge money for a birth? And also, must add, independent midwives, they also do pro bono work, and they will take payment plans. It's not like you've got to be filthy rich to have an independent midwife. So that's something I need to address right away. But there's such a bad stigma and thinking, well, we have the NHS, why do we need independent midwives?
I mean, I've never even really, my experience of independent midwives is that they're incredibly generous with their time. And yeah, we did it on a payment plan that we paid it back over the course of a year. I mean, it's their work. Why should they not be paid for their work, just like
Everyone else.
everyone else is paid for their work? I sort of don't really understand the argument. I understand. What I do think is it's sad that people can't get really personalized care and real proper continuity of care unless they can pay for it. And that is really sad. And there are pockets of sort of continuity of care teams around, but not nearly enough of them. And yeah, and it is.
And then they have their guidelines as well, which I've spoken to a lot of NHS midwives. They would love to do and help women how independent midwives do, but they are so scared about going against the guidelines because their job's on the line. There's so much politics involved in this.
Yeah,
it's scary. But I think the independent midwife versus NHS thing, the argument there, like, well, we have the NHS, why would you go? It's terrible that they charge for this. It's kind of like a parallel to the state school, private school argument. Yes, all free schools should have that standard of education, but the people that don't see it will want to pay for it. It's the same sort of, it kind of mirrors that. And if you can't get the level of care that you want through the NHS, then they are the best option. And they have no insurance right now. That's a travesty. I mean, so many women are being denied that. I mean, yes, we have doulas. I think the second best option, if you have to stay with the NHS care and you wanted an independent midwife initially, is hire a doula alongside the NHS care. But then you've got the problem now of COVID. They're withdrawing home births for a reason that I could never fathom. I mean, you'd think it'd be better, but they've withdrawn a lot of home births in different districts. So your option right now is either to go into hospital with COVID, and everyone's scared of that, or hospital at all, forget COVID, or free birth, which is great if you're really well informed and you trust your body and that is your vision, but not if you're being backed into a corner out of fear. That's when things go very wrong. So it's a pretty awful state of affairs at the moment. And I just want to thank you for coming here and telling your truth so people can see this from, you're a mother and a doctor, and this is just a wonderful experience.
I mean, there's absolutely no way we would have had the birth experience we had without independent midwives. I mean, we had our first birth experience at home was absolutely incredible with NHS midwives. The sort of on-call NHS midwife team. It was wonderful, and they were absolutely fantastic. It made me feel really looked after and safe. But I couldn't have had that with twins because there's too much fear.
Fit neatly in the guidelines, of course.
It was too outside the box. I could have said, and I know my rights, I could have said, well, you're going to have to send midwives to me because I'm going to have a home birth. But I was never going to say that because I wouldn't have felt, if people have, if the people looking after you have fear, then you're not going to feel safe and you're not going to be safe. So I was never going to do that. I'm never going to force anyone to do anything they don't feel comfortable with. And the only people I could find who were genuinely comfortable and agreed with me that it was a safe option were independent midwives. And, who knows what would have happened to me if I'd been in hospital. But I was just incredibly lucky to have found them and been able to have that experience and felt so respected and supported, and had the chance to have that amazing birth that I had.
Amen to that. Well, thank you so much, Ellie. Like, we're gonna have to finish here, but thank you. This has been wonderful. I hope people can see this and see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
So
me
thank you so much for your time, Ellie. Thank you very much.
pleasure talking to you, Nickita.